So we're speaking before the podcast. So the area that you live in is it leans Republican, and you're running as a Democrat.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm running for Congress here in Arkansas's third congressional district, which is the northwest corner of Arkansas. Comprises about 6 counties. Northwest Arkansas is probably best known for two things. One, it is the home of Walmart headquarters. This is where Walmart was born and is run out of in Bentonville, and also known for the University of Arkansas and the Razorbacks, and uh, uh, and other things. Tyson Food is here. JB Hunt Trucking Company is here. Uh, yeah, but this small corner of Northwest Arkansas has been historically has been a Republican district for the last many elections. Um, but I think something's changing. There's something in the air that is that's causing people to reconsider how they've voted in the past, and so we're trying to run a competitive race in this district.
Yeah, and so you actually ran in 2018, and you ran as a Republican, and you
Yeah,
made the switch over to the Democratic Party. And what made you make that switch? Because I know your values are not very different, but
yeah.
it's if you're like me, it's hard to find a home because it
Mm.
just seems that the parties are moving far apart from each other, but your values never really changed. But like, what made you make that change?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of people that feel kind of politically homeless. They feel like they've been through like a political identity crisis, and there's a lot of factors that have caused that for people. Um, for me, I've spent 30 years as a pastor, and I grew up in like really strict fundamentalist churches. And pastored for about 10 years in that denomination, and then my wife and I went through a deconstruction, before that was a word, where our values, our beliefs really started to shift, and we began to see the world very differently. And that led to a lot of changes in our political beliefs as well, because all that stuff is wrapped up together. So when I ran in 2018 for Congress, I did so because I was horrified at the election of Donald Trump, and particularly the role that the tribes that I had always been a part of played in getting him elected. The Republican Party and white evangelicals, with 81% of white evangelicals voting for Trump. And so I had this deep sense that I needed to do something, that I needed to get involved in some way. And long story short, I got recruited to run for Congress by an organization that their strategy was, what if we ran Republicans in bright red districts and Democrats in deep blue districts, and try to kind of throw the bums out, and get a brand new Congress elected. Uh, and so, I ran in 2018. I ran in the Republican primary. I ran as a progressive Republican. I primaried my opponent from the left in the Republican primary. It didn't work, but I learned a lot through the process, um, and it opened the door for me to be more engaged in politics ever since then. And and so I knew that after that the kind of the current iteration of the Republican Party wasn't a place where I felt comfortable anymore. And so I'm running as a Democrat now, though frankly there's a lot about the Democratic Party that is concerning as well. And I don't always feel at home, but that's kind of the way it is. Like I said,
Right.
I think a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah, but I mean, you still got 8,000 votes. Even though it was not a race that you won, you still got 8,000 votes as a Republican running as a progressive.
Yeah, it was, and I'll tell you the thing I was really proud of. My opponent spent in that primary spent about over $13 per vote that he received, and I spent like $1.72 for every vote I received. Um, and that was that was pretty important to me, to like say, what, it's we can do this efficiently and effectively without having to spend $2 million in a campaign.
Mm.
And so we're focused this time again on running a grassroots campaign that helps people feel like they're being represented by their leaders.
Right. So it was most of the money that you spent was actually the amount required to run in the first place?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, so here in Arkansas has the highest filing fees to run for office in the country. Most states, if you want to run for office, you can collect some signatures or you pay a filing fee to the Secretary of State's office. Typically, the filing fee is 1% of the salary of the job that you're going for. That's just kind of like nationally, that's what's most common. Here in Arkansas, it's a little bit different. It's not the Secretary of State's office that sets the filing fees, it's the parties themselves. So the Republican Party has used filing fees as a revenue stream. And so when I ran in 2018, just to have my name on the ballot, it cost $15,000. Um, Now, 8 years later, if I were to run in the Republican primary again, it now to run as a Republican for Congress in Arkansas costs $30,000. Um, it's absolutely insane. And it's one of those things that if I could wave a magic wand, that's something I would change about Arkansas politics, because what it does is it it prices regular people out of being able to run. And yeah, it's absolutely nuts the way the system works here.
Because that was the way that it should have been in the first place, right? For regular people to run, not these
Right.
candidates backed by corporations.
Yeah, totally. 100%.
And $30,000. I mean, that is
Yeah.
if $15,000 was not already a lot of money. I mean, $30,000. Not the average American has that.
Mm-mm.
A lot of Americans
No.
barely have that in their retirement accounts, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's crazy. And that's, and now on the Democratic side, the Democratic Party has kind of refused in Arkansas, has refused to get into, some kind of, you know, um, arms race with the Republican Party on when it comes to filing fees. And so in an attempt to attract kind of regular working folks to run for office, Democratic Party has cut their filing fees, and so it's significantly less, which is great for the candidates,
Mhm.
but it's bad for the party, because the Republican Party is just using filing fees as a revenue stream, and it gives them a slush fund that they can spend on organizing here in Arkansas. So it's excuse me, it really is a mess.
So can that be something that could be changed? Or because it's really up to the party themselves, but can there be some legislation? And like, how hard would it be to
Yeah.
even get that to change?
Yeah, here in Arkansas, the way it would have to change is one of two ways. One would be, our state legislature would have to pass a law and sign that into have the governor sign that into law to change how it is. Our current legislature and current governor are, have no interest in that. It's not on their radar at all. They don't care. And so the other thing we can do is turn it into a ballot initiative where we get it on the ballot and give voters the chance to make the decision. And that's one of those things that one of these days I'm going to get real involved in trying to make that happen. Um, but and this is getting back to kind of the federal thing, because I'm running for Congress. Um, the Constitution gives states the ability to run elections the way they want to, and And so, states have different methodology of doing this kind of stuff. Um, and that's good. That's appropriate. As long as people have equal access to the ballot, civil rights aren't being impeded by the laws. The states can run their elections the way they
Mhm.
want to, which is why, as I'm running for Congress, I find the SAVE Act very troubling because it's the federal government getting involved in the way that states run their elections and essentially imposing a poll tax on people who don't currently have a passport or some other way to validate their identity. Uh, making it more difficult for women to vote, married women in particular. And so it, yeah, I have this idea that democracy is better when more people are able to participate in every level, whether that's running for office or being able to vote. And we need to make all of that stuff easier, not harder. And what it seems to be is, the move has been lately to make things as hard as possible. And I think that we need to make it easier.
Yeah, because we're not even talking about Congress. We're talking about city council races, mayoral races, and the amount of
Mm.
money to even win a race as for city council. I mean, we're talking about
Yep.
a hefty amount,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
then having the federal government or at least federal agencies infringing upon the independence of states and how to run their elections, that just leaves room for some external influence, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's why, it's critical that, we're living in a time where people are really concerned about the future of the country. And, regardless of what party you're in, it feels like every election is absolutely critical. We always hear this thing like, "Oh, this is the most important election of our lifetime." Uh, Well, one of them is gonna be,
Mhm.
it just has to be. Have no idea which one it's actually gonna be, but man, it always feels like the next one is because the stakes feel so high.
Yeah.
Um, and that's why, I think that there is an approach that's taken sometimes where it's like, let's make this complicated, let's make this difficult, let's, get people discouraged in the process, make it confusing, and that will keep people out, which ultimately keeps us in power. And I think we need to have an approach where you know I fully believe in the ideals of the country, that this is a government of the people, by the people, for the people. Um, the we the people who are
Mhm.
working to form a more perfect union. Uh, that takes our involvement, and and it's no coincidence when you hear about this stuff in Arkansas. It's no coincidence that Arkansas has the lowest voter participation in the country. We rank dead last in the country in voter registration, and we rank dead last in the country in voter turnout. I have a friend that says Arkansas isn't a red state; it's a non-voting state, and he might very well be right.
Yeah. But what do you think that is?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of apathy about whether or not electing somebody is going to make any difference. I think there's people in Arkansas, um, you know, are realistic, and they can look at things and say, okay, if this isn't going to make a difference in my life, I'm not going to bother with this. I got better things to do than to waste my time doing this. And after years and years and years of hearing promises from elected leaders who then don't do things that they want, it turns people off. Or for instance, we have a ballot initiative here in Arkansas that over 60% of of the vote voted for to raise the minimum wage. I mean, that's a, any election, that's a landslide. You get over 60%, that's a landslide. And our state legislature in Little Rock worked to undermine that and circumvent it and to keep the minimum wage from going up. And, people just get the attitude of like, well, what's the point if they're just gonna do whatever they want? And so we've got to try to break through that cynicism, break through that apathy, and give people a reason to believe that, hey, this is really important. There is a lot at stake, and I'm the kind of person who's going to go to Washington D.C. and actually work for you. Um, I talk a lot about how representative is literally the job title, right? Like
Hmm.
when you're in the House of Representatives, you are a representative. Uh, I don't know a lot of people in this district that feel like their congressperson represents them. I think they feel like their congressperson represents the CEO of Walmart. I think they feel like their congressman represents the corporate donors and the military contractors and the millionaires and the billionaires. But regular folks in this district, they don't feel represented, and that's I think that's a tragedy, and that's why I'm running for office, because the people of this district deserve to have someone who will represent them and work for them.
And it just seems like it's getting worse. I mean, it's pretty bad to say it, but it seems like it's getting worse, and especially in a state, as you said, in Arkansas, where really no one pays attention. It's easier to, just walk down the street into Walmart's headquarters and, ask for a little something, something, right?
Yeah, we're well, I always say, we've got so much work to do.
Hmm.
And I've been all over the district. I've over the last couple of years, I've been all over the state, through some of the work that I've done, and met people all over the state and all over this district that care deeply and are doing the work and are putting in the effort. And I there's that thing where they say, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is today.
Hmm.
And that we're, we're we could, complain and bemoan the fact that the work hasn't been done in the past that can make a difference in people's lives here in Arkansas, or we can get to work making sure that we're planting the tree today, and that's what there's people all over this state that are doing that, and I'm proud to be a part of that.
Right, but I don't even know if it ever will change because I mean we're talking about a monster here, especially when it comes to running an election. Running an election is not easy,
Yeah.
and you need a lot of money to run an effective election. And we know that money
Mm.
wins elections. It's not true all the time, but it's also true that if you don't raise any money at all, y- you're not seen as a serious competitor, which is just something that we've established already. That these corporate candidates, we put up on a pedestal if they're able to raise a lot of money because for some reason people just see them as more trustworthy. If you're having a lot of these companies investing in these candidates, which is it is an investment, and when you process an investment or when you give an investment, you're looking for a return on that investment, and that's what's
Mhm.
happening.
Yep.
Especially when you have a lot of these corporations funding campaigns, they're not doing it for the good of their heart and
Yeah, that's right.
for a better society. They're
Yeah.
looking for a return.
Yeah. Oh, you're absolutely right. And I think it's unfortunate that the media and other folks at times, that like the shorthand decision on whether or not a campaign is viable is based on how much money it's raised. Um, and certainly that is one aspect of viability of a campaign, but it's not the only one. There are other things as well. Um, and but I'll tell you, I'm really encouraged because all over the country there have been candidates who have resisted taking corporate PAC money and have gotten elected. And their loyalty, because they don't take PAC money or corporate PAC money, their loyalty is with the voters who send them to office rather than the corporate donors. And it's happened all over the country in red states and blue states. It's been Republicans and Democrats. Like from AOC at one end, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in New York at one end, to like someone like Matt Gaetz on the other end of the spectrum didn't take, the former congressman from Florida didn't take corporate PAC money. And so it shows that you can do it. And it's absolutely, I think it's absolutely essential. Katie Porter's running for governor of California. She doesn't take corporate PAC money. Ro Khanna, Cori Bush, who's running for election again in St. Louis. I mean, there's people all over the country that are doing this, and I think we need even more.
Yeah, and there's also another thing. There's certain candidates that I see, and I see them as being genuine, and then there's other candidates
Mm,
that just don't have that factor that they're able to be relatable to just the American
mm,
person or the average person. And so I met Cory Booker, and out of all places, I met
mm.
him in an elevator, and we rode the elevator together. But I mean, he couldn't be the nicest person,
Yeah.
there. And the same thing that I've heard about people that have met Marjorie Taylor Greene, that she's one
Mm,
of the nicest people. But now she got pushed out of Congress, and it just seems that if you stand, even you may not believe in politicians uh platform or values, but something that you have to respect is that they stand firm in what they believe, and they're not
mhm.
influenced by outside parties. And sometimes, so something that I've seen is that if you stand true to what you believe in, you're kind of like pushed out. I- And it sucks to see that, because what we're left with is
Mm.
a lot of these politicians that they don't really believe in what they vote for. But if the check is big enough,
Yeah.
that's going to dissuade their vote.
Yeah, I think you're right. And, that's why, it's critical that, that that people be engaged and vote for candidates that will have the integrity to stand on their principles. Um, and listen, I think it's critical that we have principled positions, um, that we hold those boldly. But I also think that we need grace in our political conversations. That, hey, like I'm personally really drawn to the candidates that are bold in how they hold their positions, but also gracious in how they deal with people. um and that kind of combination, I think, is really powerful, because you can see, okay, here's someone who, like, they're not wishy-washy, they're not for sale to the highest bidder. Like,
Mhm.
they believe things, and we might not agree on what those things are, but they, on every issue, but they believe things, and they're not an asshole,
Right.
like they're nice to people, and they can have conversations. They can disagree without it being, the relationship being ruptured. They can find ways to compromise or look for common ground that might exist between people. That's the kind of leaders I think we need. And my hope is that we can continue to elect more and more people that are that way. That's who I'm trying to be.
Mhm.
And the kind of leader I want to be. And that's why I'm asking for the people in my district to send me to DC to be that kind of person.
Right, because I've seen that. I voted for Trump. I supported Trump in this past election, and now looking at him, it's like, is this the same guy that was running? The same guy that I thought maybe this time would be different, but it just
Mm.
seems like it was different, but in just all
Mm.
the wrong ways.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's been interesting um, to see the differences between his first term and the second term, and I there there's been a lot of things that have turned out to be very different than what people expected. Um, everything from, you know, the the war in Iran and the impact that that's had on gas prices to, the really sluggish growth of the economy, particularly for regular people, regular working folks, and continuing to struggle. And I know the president likes to blame everything on Joe Biden, but at some point, like at some point, you've got to own the fact that you haven't delivered on what you said you were going to do.
Yeah, and not even that. He blames everything that goes bad on his own staffers. You know, that
Hmm.
photo that he published, just blaming it on like, oh, it wasn't me, someone else did it. He does that. He does this all the time. If he takes credit for what's good, but blames everything that goes bad on everyone else around him.
Yeah, yeah, and I I think probably all of us at some point or another have had, a boss or a supervisor, a manager who's been that way. That like, man, when things are going well, they'll take all the credit in the world, but when, if things are struggling, they're pointing the finger at the staff or the team or the employees. And man, nothing craters morale faster than that approach, right? Like people don't like working in those kinds of environments, and I think you're seeing that with the president's approval ratings are at record lows because people are feeling like, yeah, I'm not okay with this.
Because so I had a conversation with a friend, and I was telling him how, I mean, we know that Trump just can't run again. There's no way that he'll be elected again, even if he could. But I told him that Republicans across the country were going to lose because everything that's happening right now at this very moment. And he said no, he doesn't believe that because what's happening with immigration. I'm like, hold up a minute. Gas is literally $5 a gallon on average.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you honestly think that people are going to vote because of immigrants when they can't even put food on the table or fuel up their car?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
something that is happening is that some people are blinded to the fact that there are things that are affecting them, but they're going to vote for something that they hear on the media of like what's going wrong in the country.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. It's it happens almost every time that in a president's the first midterm of a president's um, term as president, the first midterm congressional elections, the whatever party the president is in, that party has a really hard time in those midterm elections.
Mhm.
And I mean, it happens, I mean, all the time. It happened to Trump
Yeah.
in the last election. Happened to Biden. Happened to Obama. Happened to George W. Bush. The only time recently that it didn't happen was right after 9/11,
Mhm.
and there was a little bit different sentiment in the air. Um, I so Republicans are, because of that, are already facing a challenge historically, and then when you add to that um, the state of the economy, the nervousness that people have about how unaffordable everything is,
Mhm.
and I tend to think when it comes to gas prices that the president, whoever the president is,
Mm.
gets way too much credit or way too much blame for gas prices,
Yeah.
because in a lot of ways there's very little that the president can do to impact gas prices,
Mhm.
except bomb a Middle East country that, produces
Mhm.
oil. And it's
Yeah.
like the one thing that the president can actually do that impacts gas prices, President Trump has done. And it has had an impact on gas prices all over the world. And that's not just about how much it costs for you to, commute to work or go on a road trip. When oil prices go up, it affects the price of everything,
Oh yeah.
because the boats, the planes, the trucks that move products around the world, that make sure stores are stocked, that make deliveries, like the supply chain, it increased the costs to produce products, to ship products, to deliver products, and that all of that ends up in, like, in the price of how much stuff costs. And
Mhm.
so, this this increase in gas prices that we're seeing, um, isn't going to make the affordability crisis that we're in the midst of any easier. In
Right.
fact, it's going to make groceries even more expensive, the the construction materials even more expensive, utilities even more expensive, and all of that um, bodes badly for Republicans in the midterms.
Oh yeah, I agree 100%. And the average person does not follow the stock market, but the average person does follow the price of gas. And the price of
Yes.
gas is an indicator on how well the economy is doing. And when you drive by and you see $5 a gallon, it's
Yeah.
letting you know that the economy is not that well. And what happens when you see the $5 a gallon, you're going to spend less. And when you spend less, there's more money flowing through the economy, which is just a revolving cycle that just keeps going. And when we
Yeah.
see that Trump is in the middle of a war in Iran, so he bombs Iran. Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz. Then he does a blockade. So no of there. I think they were letting about 3 ships across. So they put in a blockade. Now Iran said that they're going to open the Strait of Hormuz, so it opens to all traffic. And Trump said that that's not good enough, that he's going to keep it closed. Now Iran today said that they're going to just close it again. It's like, what long
Yeah.
game is he playing here? I mean,
Yeah.
we don't have enough.
Yeah.
We don't have that much time, and we know that that is directly affecting what's happening with fuel prices, and people are going to look at that. And when you add on top of him pissing off like the religious community, it's
Mhm.
like, what game is he really playing here now?
Yeah. Yeah. It's an excellent question. Yeah. It has been a weird couple of weeks, for thinking about Trump's relationship to, like, his base. His base is religious voters. That is how he got elected president. Um, in 2016, he got 81% of white evangelicals. I think in 2024, it was like 80% of white evangelicals. He won the majority of the white Catholic vote. He won the majority of the white mainline Protestant vote. Um, this is his base. Without religious voters, he would not have gotten elected. And in the course of a week's time or so, we had the president's spiritual advisor right before Easter. I think the day before Good Friday, on Monday, Thursday, in a White House prayer service, compare the president to Jesus Christ, and um, And then on Easter Sunday, we had the president talking about destroying Iran, um, wiping out a whole civilization, ending that social media post with praise be to Allah. Um, we had the president posting a meme where, you know, he was in the place of, what most people thought would have been the place where Jesus Christ would be. Um, and kind of picturing himself as Jesus. He tried to backtrack that and said he thought it was an image of a doctor, but people thought differently. With president getting into a debate with the Pope and suggesting, both the president and the vice president suggesting the Pope is wrong about his theological teachings. Um, and then you have the president posting another picture of Jesus hugging him, another AI generated meme picture, and and you've got all of this stuff happening, and religious voters who are Trump's base are just feeling like, wait a minute, what is going on? Like, are it's one thing to like poke a little fun at
Mhm.
and tweak the your opponents by being a little sarcastic with them, but that's not what Donald Trump has done here at
Mhm.
all. He has done a number of things that have alienated his most significant voting base. Now, maybe he doesn't care because he's not running for re-election again. Um, so he doesn't need voter support. But the sooner public approval moves away from Donald Trump, it becomes more and more difficult for him to impose his will on Republicans in Congress to pass the bills that he wants. And we're seeing that erosion beginning to happen already with the SAVE Act. That he has said he's not going to sign anything else into law until the SAVE Act passes, and they can't get it passed in the Senate. So you're seeing that maybe what is happening is elected Republicans are less and less scared of Donald Trump. They're seeing a future in the Republican Party post Trump, and Donald Trump's, the public support for him is waning even amongst his most ardent supporters.
Yeah, because let's go back to that photo specifically. I mean, when he came out and said that he was a physician, not Jesus, there's people that believed him. I'm like, how can like a doctor does not dress like that, first of all. And at
Yeah,
this point, I honestly believe that people would believe him if he was the one that said that he warned about the British coming.
yeah, yeah,
There's
yeah,
people that would believe that.
yeah. I listen. I am not a doctor,
Yeah.
and I don't post memes of myself as a doctor. Um, but I have a podcast with the work that I do
Mhm.
with an organization called Vote Common Good. And after the debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden during the last presidential election, um, I got on that. We had an immediate reaction. I got on that podcast, and my co-host and I, we both said, people who had worked hard to get Joe Biden elected in 2020, um, said this is a person who's not competent to be president. Um,
Mhm.
he needs to drop out of the race, and like this is not okay. Um, and I look at because we saw his behavior, we saw the way he carried himself, and he said
Mhm.
something's wrong. This is not all right.
Mhm.
And I think we're beginning to see the same things with Donald Trump. That like, listen, I don't know what it is, but this is not normal behavior. There's something's wrong here,
Mhm.
and for the good of the country, for his own good, some folks might need to step in here, and it's worrisome and troublesome.
Yeah, because another thing is that we can't hope that the president does a bad job because
Yeah.
the president is basically the head of state. So he
Yeah.
represents the entire country. So we can't hope for him
Yes.
to do a bad job because when he does a bad job, we all suffer.
Yes.
So
Yes. Yeah.
we want him to do a good job. And I wanted him to do a good job, when he got into office. But the thing is that the Republican Party needs to start distancing itself from Trump because Trump is not sane. I don't know what other way to put it, but he's doing a disservice to the party because now people are looking at that party like they're the problem. Even
Mm.
at some point, they kind of are, but it seems like they're in handcuffs to Trump because
Mm.
it's Trump holds really
Yeah.
big influence on the party, but I think that is
Totally.
changing. And what the Republican Party should start doing is distancing itself from him because if they don't, and
Yeah.
if the party doesn't, I mean, they don't really have at least a short term future. I know this thing is going to
Mhm.
blow over in the future, but they're going to lose the next couple of elections.
Yep. Yep. It's Donald Trump has dominated American politics for the last 10 years. And, since he came down that golden elevator, in 2015, he, he has been the lead story in American politics ever since. And with every passing day, we're getting closer and closer to a political world that is post-Trump. And I think that's good for the country. Um, and I think you're right. Republicans, it, if it doesn't happen before the midterms, it certainly will happen after, where, there are Republicans in the Senate, there are Republicans in the administration that want to be president.
Mhm.
And um, they will all make different calculations on what it would take for them to get elected president, and they'll begin to make those moves. And for some of them, it will be distancing themselves as far as they can from Donald Trump. For others, it will be trying to, you know, take the mantle of Donald Trump and take on his legacy. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, but with every passing day, we're closer to a political world that is post-Trump, and in my mind, that I'm looking forward
Mhm.
to the day when a new president is inaugurated and there's no more Trumps on the ballot.
No, yeah, it will happen because even when it comes down to JD Vance, I read his book, and this was before he even ran for Senate, before he was in politics.
Mm-hmm.
I read his Hillbilly Elegy, and
Mm-hmm.
I got to know the type of person that he is. And this is not who he is, but to
Yeah.
beat Trump, you need to understand Trump. In order to get ahead of him, you need to know that Trump's ego is huge, and the only way to beat him at his own game is to feed into that ego. So, of course,
Yes.
as vice president,
Yeah.
there's people that don't agree with JD Vance and are kind of against JD Vance, but you need to understand who he's dealing with. And
Mm-hmm.
someone who likes getting his ego massaged
Yeah.
is
Yes.
what he is doing and what is expected to be done in order to be in his good graces. Because if you are not, we've seen what he has done to his opponents.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Here he's someone who demands loyalty to him, but does not demonstrate loyalty to others. And we've seen him, throw out um, former administration members. This is someone who built his whole brand on firing people, and
Mhm.
built his whole public persona on firing people. And in his first administration, now we're beginning to see it in his second administration, where he's just kind of throwing people overboard, and it puts people like JD Vance and Marco Rubio and others in a very tenuous situation. I would not want to be in their shoes.
Mhm. Yeah, it's stress that they must be dealing with, like you cannot imagine. So for
Yeah.
JD Vance to be able to hang on for this long, I mean, you gotta give him credit because look at what happened with Mike Pence. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. There certainly was a falling out there for sure.
yeah, and I mean, just being in the room with those conversations, I'm sure that there are some conversations that are happening behind closed doors, that behind Trump's back, that they are not very happy. But what can they do? He dominates
Yeah.
the entire party.
Yes.
He holds the Oval Office,
Hmm.
the power that he controls, and to be on his bad side, that's pretty dangerous. And as you said, there's people that just want to be president that are in his circle. So in order to get there, you need to appease your boss,
Yeah. Yep.
right?
Yeah. It's going to be fascinating to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, like if this is something that happens or continues to happen after he leaves office, after he's done being the influence as that he is, and there's people that are trying to be how he is now, I don't think they have a future in the party either.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think so too. I think he's a unique personality that that I'm sure there will be others who will try to emulate his approach, and I'm not sure who else could pull it off.
Mhm,
And it's also, like I'm a big football fan, and you see this thing happen with with coaches when a team changes coaches, they might go from like a player's coach who's real popular with the players to like a strict disciplinarian who wants it done his way. And or they might switch from, okay, we had an offensive head coach, now we're going to switch to a defensive head. That the pendulum tends to swing. And
mhm,
I think we probably could see that happen as well. We're like, okay, we've had enough of that. Now let's try something completely different.
mhm. Yeah, but also it reaches a point that it just gets exhausting of switching from party to
Yes.
party
Yes.
every single
Yeah.
election. I
Yeah.
mean, we just came back from Democrats losing in 2020, was it 4, right?
Yep.
The last
Yeah.
election. And
Yes.
now Republicans are in office. Now Republicans are going to lose, and then Democrats are going to come in. But like, when does
Yep.
it change? Because it's so exhausting. Just from like, maybe let's try the other party. Maybe this time will be different. But everything you
That's
get
right.
is the same thing.
That's right. That absolutely frustrating. Um, but I'm hoping to be part of that group that heads to Washington D.C. and can do something different than has been happening.
Yeah.
And 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 frankly, keep Donald Trump from implementing any more of his agenda.
Mhm.
While he finishes up his second term as president.
Yeah, but I mean, I hope that this election goes good for you, and we
Yeah,
need to,
appreciate that.
yeah, we need to get like money out of politics. That
Yeah.
although I voted for Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, I mean, my stances are have always been the same. They haven't changed. It's just sometimes Democrats make more sense, sometimes Republicans make more sense. I'm not
Mhm.
really switching the party as to how the party is switching what they believe in. So just getting in there, I mean, I don't know if we could live without money in politics because I know that money influences a lot of the politicians, and it has gone and ingrained so much into politics that taking it out, you're going to be pissing off a lot of people. So I don't even know if that's even possible.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's certainly a challenge, but sometimes the right thing to do is not always the most popular thing to do. And I think getting money out of politics absolutely is the right thing, and I'm, going to be working for it.
Yeah, well, thank you for having this conversation with me.
Yeah, Eric, I've really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on.